G'day, I'm Ali Amo, and this is the A Lease On Life podcast. I've recently written a book called Detangling the Web of Life, the complete guide to understanding you and everyone else. It's all about this crazy philosophy of mine called the Web of Life. You may have heard that concept before. Some people have, some people haven't. But I figured, why the hell not? Just whip out a potty to bring the philosophy to life and start a conversation with the world. We had a lot of good feedback from the last episode in particular when we started looking at the beliefs that we hold in the world sphere. Big shout out to Marie. I got your message on Facebook and thank you for sharing with me your thoughts on fate and destiny. This episode, we're actually going to look at some of the beliefs we hold in our self sphere and where they come from, and look at how we can break them. Before you break a cycle, the first thing you need to do is understand how the cycle works, how it operates inside of you. And it's not just how it is expressed, which tends to be how people recognize that there is a problem in their lives. Oftentimes, we see the physical expression of a cycle as the problem. So things like addictions, whether that's to gambling, to social media, pornography, substances. The thing is, though, you need to think of addiction as a symptom. It's not the cause of the problem, it's the symptom of a problem. And it's the way you express what's going on inside you. And to understand what the core bug is in your web, you need to look back through your own personal history to understand which experience or experiences led to that expression. Over time, the more any action is repeated, the more it becomes ingrained in your web and becomes the go-to form of expression that you use whenever you're repeating cycles. And it may be an expression of multiple cycles. The easiest way to understand this is something as simple as social media. If I were to ask you how many times in a given day you check your account or check your messages or log in and log out of all social media platforms in a day, are you aware of how often you're doing this? And more than I'd be interested to know how often you're doing this, I'd like to know if you're conscious of the catalyst for you doing that. You may think it's just a knee-jerk reaction when you're bored, but you might be watching something or present in an experience, and then you mentally check out and emotionally check out, and physically you start checking into your social media accounts while you're in a conversation with someone, even if you're on the phone. These things are the symptom of something far deeper. And it isn't until you start to unpack what goes on behind the scenes that you can understand. Some people will call it the trigger, but how that loop of your cycle gets to the point of expression. There are so many cycles just in the belief sector. And if you're looking at your cycles in general, all of them rely on a belief of some kind. So if you have an addiction, there is a belief or set of beliefs that you're holding on to in order to maintain that addiction cycle. So if you want to break a substance abuse problem that you have in your life, it's less about stopping the act itself than it is about stopping the sequence that your cycle actually takes in your life. Becoming aware of that process that goes on internally is actually the hardest part of understanding a cycle in order to break it. It's far easier to have the mentality that you have something that you want to stop doing, you stop doing it and the problem goes away. But that's not how it works. If there is some action that you take in your life that you know isn't good for you, and it may be something to do with eating or sleeping, it might not be the addiction side of things. Stopping something physical that you do may seem to solve the problem in your mind, but all that will happen is the cycle will keep running and you will replace that physical act or that form of expression with something else. And even though for a period of time, you might find that you're able to start something more positive in your life, like a form of exercise, or instead of eating something unhealthy, you can eat something healthy. It won't take long of that cycle repeating itself with a change of expression for you to then fall back into your old expression. And when you fall off the wagon, so to speak, it's going to be harder for you to jump back on. And that's because that cycle has been running that way for so long and you're not actually getting to the core of the issue. You're focusing on a symptom, and that's very much what the Western medical system does. It looks at symptoms more than it looks for the causes. And so other symptoms start showing up, and it's this constant having to deal with other symptoms. And the sad truth is, long before we start to express our cycles in ways that cause damage to our health, the internal cycles, the mental and emotional parts, are echoing in your mind and in your body and causing you far more damage. And unfortunately, there are cycles that have been operating in our communities and our societies for generations upon generations. A lot of the damage that has been caused with that has actually changed the fabric of society altogether. So you may not be aware of the extent that some of these cycles are operating, and it's become such a normal part of your life and it's so ingrained in you that it might even take time for you to recognize when you're doing this or how often it's operating in society. One of the most common cycles that I see that comes from not just the world sphere but the social sphere, and we all keep repeating it ourselves, is the cycle of appearances. And although it may seem obvious as to what that is, how deep it actually runs in our communities and within ourselves takes a little bit of time to recognize, because it happens so frequently that you can't register what you're actually doing at the time. And the saddest part about the cycle of appearances is that for many people, it has dictated the choices that they made in their lives. When they've interviewed people on their deathbed, the number one regret was never the things that they chose in their life. It was the things that they didn't do and the person that they are that they didn't choose. They didn't choose themselves. They didn't follow what they wanted to do and what they felt in their heart was right for them. Their choices were made based off the expectations and negative reactions from those in their social sphere had they chose what they wanted to. The lesson we can learn from that is that a life lived true to oneself is the ultimate goal. No one wants to die with regrets. But this belief cycle of appearances has made people make choices that went against their own desires, their own dreams, and for many, their own hearts. I once met a woman in her mid-80s. She was a lone wolf traveling the world against her family's wishes. And in her words, she'd made so many choices in her life for her family that now that she was widowed and on the back end of life, she wanted to spend the rest of her life choosing herself. I was lucky enough to travel with this woman and we became very close. And I was very amazed at all the things that she was doing. I'm talking base jumping off a mountain in the Himalayas, going white water rafting, zip lining through rainforests in Costa Rica. And I asked her, if your family don't really approve and they don't feel comfortable with you traveling, how do they feel about the things that you're doing? And it scares the hell out of them. And I would think that after her doing these things, it would more inspire people than instill fear. One of our last days together, we started talking and she'd expressed some of the experiences that she had in her marriage. Domestic violence is still a very, very real and very major problem in society, and it occurs in many families, many households, many relationships. And I asked her, and I don't know why I did, but I asked her if she felt like her husband was the love of her life. And for someone who was very open and forthcoming with the truth, she shut down immediately and didn't want to talk about it and asked me not to ask questions like that. And it was less about pushing her, but more about understanding what went on underneath. Because all I felt with this woman was that she didn't have regrets in her life. But I only knew a part of her life where she was choosing herself. I didn't think that there may have been a catalyst for her doing this. And so I gently nudged her to share the truth with me. And all she said was, it was a very different time. And to be honest, knowing what the story is, it's not that different a time. It's taken a long time to become somewhat different to the past. But as it turned out, she was a married woman with children who fell in love with a married man with children. And they very much wanted to be together. But because of society and the world at large at the time, in order to be with someone and leave the home, the marriage, the family, you kind of had to exile yourself or you would be exiled. And so as a result of that decision that they were faced with, I don't know who made the call or if they both agreed to it, but the decision was that they would not leave their town, their family, and their extended families and would stay in their situation and cut off the relationship. When someone tells you their truth, you see the emotion on them, even if you don't feel it. But depending on the magnitude of the emotion, you do feel it. And I felt so heavy and so sad and miserable that I had no choice but to say, do you regret that decision? And I won't get into the intricate details of it, but yes, she did. So that experience and the belief at the time that she had to do what was considered right by her family, by her community, by religion, was actually the catalyst to her breaking that cycle and keeping herself happy in later life. I call her Wonder Woman. I can't imagine what life would be like looking back and wishing you had have done it all differently and chose what you wanted and followed your heart instead of choosing what other people wanted and following an expectation or a belief in society. that once you're married, you stay married and that you stay for the kids. And unfortunately, I can't tell you how many people even today are in that same situation. They're in an unhappy relationship that they think is worthwhile staying in because of children. But the cycle of appearances manifests in so many different ways that it may not be as a result of love that you perpetuate the cycle. Social media is a great example of the cycle of appearances repeating. I often see, and I'm grateful that there's a focus on authenticity happening at the moment, being authentic to you and living a life authentic to you, making choices that are authentic to you, because ultimately what you're looking at is breaking the cycle of appearances. However, sometimes the message itself is more authentic than the images or the videos portrayed in the post. And I see a contradiction, because authenticity is not perfection. Or rather, perfection is not authenticity. Authenticity is raw, it's real, it's honest. And it shows the full spectrum of human life, human emotion, human experience. And the same way that you may edit the photos, even just the culling of the photos that you choose to share public on social media with the world. That's a great example. But then the extent that people go to in editing their images or their videos to portray the best, putting your best foot forward and portraying yourself to be perfect, that's the cycle of appearances repeating. And yeah, that's the physical expression of the cycle. Culling the photos, editing things, spending 45 minutes on creating the post that takes less than 45 seconds to upload but stays there for, in your mind, it's like eternal, but say 45 years. The mental and emotional cycles that are operating underneath, though, and the experience that started to give you that knowledge that you then integrated to create these forms of expression of it, that's where the problem actually is. It's not so much in the editing and the culling and the designing and the sharing of content. It's the beliefs that go into what you're choosing to share. And a lot of it comes down to the cycle of unworthiness. And when you look at the cycle of appearances, that is the main negative cycle attached to it. They kind of need each other in order to exist. Now, the experience that gave you the belief that you're not good enough being your most authentic and true self, a lot of it comes down to school, unfortunately. Again, a lot of it is teachers, but it's also friends and students and family members. It's always someone in the social sphere. But you've also got to consider the possibility that your beliefs about yourself came less from your actual beliefs about yourself, but more your beliefs about others. Often it's in comparison to someone else that you consider yourself less than. And then over time, that person and that experience becomes more and more distant to the present moment, and you're still holding on to that less than. In order to break the cycle of unworthiness and the cycle of appearances, you have to be able to recognize when you're doing it. And it's not just with social media stuff, not at all. I even know someone with a terminal illness who refuses to go to hospital looking like a patient or someone who needs to go to hospital. The lengths that this person will go to and the time that elapses in order to get ready to go to hospital often means that they are closer to death when they go to hospital. But this belief, it's the cycle of unworthiness. Whether that person can recognize that they're doing that, that's on them. But if you're not good enough as you are when you're dying or on death's door to just authentically go as yourself, you need to put on the facade that everything's okay, that you're okay, and that you look $1,000,000 all the time. But we do this when we're going to the shops. We even do this when people come over, wanting your house to be presentable, wanting your face and your clothes and everything about you to be presentable. And when you start relationships with people, we do this as well. We put our best foot forward. Cut to a year or two later and the difference in the effort that you put in. Some of the examples I've given are more extreme, but I think that goes to show just how deep these cycles run in our lives. And they're just two. The belief strand alone, beliefs itself, even without history, just beliefs in all of our webs are so full of bugs that were caught far too long ago to have the weight that they have, and yet this applies for all of us. We spiral around beliefs that we formed so long ago and not only reinforce them, but reinforce the cycle in our lives so that we will be perpetuating them still 5-10 years from now if we're not doing the work on revealing them. And part of that work is learning how to recognize when you are repeating the cycle. When you're posting on social media, when you're getting ready to go to an event, asking people if you look okay, asking people if what you think is right or what you feel is right, or if the way you handled a situation was right. It's one thing to question yourself, but it's another thing to question someone else about you. Because if there's one thing you know about personal experiences, is that they're personal for a reason. Your perception of your experiences is very unique to you, to the point that if you share an experience with someone else, you may have gone through it together, but you do not see it the same way. Just the same as two people can go through a very significant life event in common and take from it, learn from it, grow from it differently. And in some cases, not at all. But if there's one thing we all have in common, it's the belief cycles that have been perpetuated in society that make us believe that we have to do things in order to save face, or for people not to judge us negatively, and for us to be accepted. And for some people, it means sacrificing their love, sacrificing their health, sacrificing their happiness. So to break those cycles, first you need to be aware of how it functions in your life, or how they function, because they're a bit of a tag team, those two, the cycle of appearances and the cycle of unworthiness. A lot of people are working on breaking the cycle of unworthiness, and it starts with the expression that I love myself. The whole I am enough fits into this category as well. And the idea is from that point, you then start integrating aspects of the new cycle into your life. So someone who does love themselves and believes that they are enough, they are good enough, they are whatever enough, the way that person would treat themselves needs to start being integrated into your present moment. And while you're integrating parts of that expression and making that your reality, you need to be feeding yourself knowledge. And it could be about the benefits of self-love, of self-care, of self-acceptance. Gratitude journals are great for things like this. But there are so many sources of information that can assist you to develop the knowledge that what you're doing is not only right for you, but it's right for society. It's how we break the cycle. And once you've gained that knowledge and you're still integrating parts of that cycle being broken into your life, that expression starts to take shape, and then eventually it becomes a natural part of your experience. But it takes work. And this is why being aware of both of those cycles in your life is important, because you could be working on the authenticity and loving and embracing yourself and accepting yourself as you are. But that's sort of what's happening behind closed doors. But in front of the people that you know and also the people that you don't, you are still perpetuating the cycle of appearances. Because that sends the message that you care more about how things look to other people and what other people think than you do to yourself and for yourself. And if you want to know where that's come from, a lot of the time it was your own family. And they were just repeating the cycle that was set before them and before them and before them, and kind of around the world. It exists in every culture. The idea that how it looks on the outside matters most. So it's a cycle that you need to break, not just for yourself, to set the example for those around you, and to break the cycle of society so future generations don't experience a world sphere cycle where appearance matters more than authenticity.
So, thanks for being here with me for this app. New ones will come out for you every other Thursday. Now, if you'd like to stay up to date with the world of Ali Ammo, follow me on socials.